we are operating in life from a hidden dimension, from a completely hidden dimension that's not conscious. We don't have access consciously to it unless we do certain things. So all of us in life operate according to unconscious, completely unconscious principles that are inherited. The basis is inherited. And then from that inherited basis, throughout life, other layers of unconscious operating, thinking, emoting, feeling is laid over it. But the very core of our being and how we operate in everyday life functions on a completely unconscious level. And with constellation work, when we do it in a group setting, what we do is we bring that unconscious picture to light. I'll give you an example. A couple comes to me and says, our son is so unruly. He's always getting into trouble. We don't know anymore what to do. The school sends recommendations, notes all the time. He's always angry. He doesn't listen. We don't know what the problem is. We love him, we spoil him, we do everything we can for him, and yet nothing works. So this is the initial story, the surface story that people are operating on in life. And I never listen to the story because I know something completely different goes on underneath in the unconscious ground of programming that makes the surface look a particular way. But what people report as the surface story, what's going on in life, is never, ever what's going on underneath, ever. So constellation work immediately takes us to a completely different place of knowing and understanding and seeing. And traditionally the work was done in a group setting so that we have access to that underlying unconscious dynamic. Let's go back to that example. A couple comes to me, parents come to me and say, this child is unruly. I hear it, this is the issue. There is an unruly child. The parents love the child, they do everything they can to make the child comfortable and have a good life, and yet the child is acting out. So why is the child acting out? That's my question as a facilitator. The people love him, they do whatever they can, they want the best for the child, and yet the child is acting out. So there's a reason the child is acting out. What's the reason? That's my question. It's always my question. What's the real reason? The surface story is there. And how do I need to open myself up to a higher knowing or a bigger knowing so that the real unconscious reason can show up? And I then can really help a person, because what we'll do is we'll shift the underlying unconscious picture programming, and then on the surface the person will act differently. So when we shift that unconscious dynamic, basically, from which we then operate in life in a particular way, we'll operate now differently, because what has been running underneath has been changed. So I have the mother and father pick 3 different peoples from this large group of people who have gathered to do constellation work. Nobody knows each other, they're all coming together to heal difficult family situations. So we'd have usually a large room with people having the chairs up against the wall. So we'll have a very large open space in the room available for the constellation to be set up. So I'm going to ask the mother, for instance, to start setting up the constellation. She would then pick 3 people from the total strangers who are part of the group to represent. So she would pick a woman for herself. She would pick a man for the husband. the father of the child, and she would pick a man for the boy. So she would collect these three people, would come in the middle of the open space, and they would just stand there. And then I would ask the woman to place her hands on each person that she picked and place them in the open space wherever she's moved to. It's not a thinking, oh, I love my husband, so I'm going to stand myself really close to him. It's not a thought process. It's an internal movement. Where does this woman feel like in this open space is the right place for the husband, the right place for her, and the right place for the child? So when she does that, the example I'm going to give, she may have placed herself on the left side of the circle looking outside. So she would be facing the people who are looking into the circle, who are sitting down. So she would be looking out that way. She may have placed her husband on the opposite side, on the right side of the circle, also looking towards the people, the participants who are looking in. So he would be looking out. So both people are far apart in the circle, and they're both looking out. And then she places the boy right in the middle between them. And she says, yeah, that's the right picture. And if the husband is there, I would ask him, does this feel right? Would you have a different sense of where everybody goes? And he may just come in and say, no, actually that feels right. Okay, so that would be the unconscious picture that the father, the mother, and the son carry each within them in relation to each other, to that particular problem they are bringing. So if they would bring a different problem, like my son is bedwetting, for instance, it may look different. Or my son isn't eating normally, right? So it would be a different dynamic. The initial unconscious picture may look very different. So the picture we get set up is always in relation to a problem. So as a facilitator, if I look at that unconscious family picture, it tells me many, many, many things. First of all, it's going to tell me that this child isn't seen and taken as a child, because the child stands in the middle between the parents and they are not close to him. There's this huge gap between the mother and the father and the child, right? So this child essentially is by himself in this family system. He's not connected. Imagine a 5 or 6 year old child having actually on an energetic, vibratory level, which is, where life really initially happens in the core, is not linked. So this child, even though the parents on the surface love this child and do everything for them, underneath where it matters, the child stands completely on its own. So that's a huge revelation to the parents when they see that. They would have never imagined that beforehand from their story, right? So that's huge. Immediately, this child is gonna feel lost. He's not gonna feel safe. He's not gonna feel protected. He's not gonna feel like the parents see me. He's gonna feel like I have to do something that I'm seen. So the acting out could be a way for this child to actually get recognized by the parents, or have them, give him attention so he feels supported. So that initial picture is huge in explaining what may be going on underneath on a soul level. We would call it the soul level, the energetic, vibratory, unmanifest level in a way. Now, that's just one part that this picture would show me. The other picture it would show me that the husband and the wife, or the parents of the child, are not linked. They are far, far, far apart. So why are they so far apart? And why are they looking out? They're not even looking at each other. They're not even looking at the child, right? They could be far apart looking at each other, but they're not even looking at each other. They are far apart, and each one of them is looking out. So imagine how hard a relationship is gonna be if underneath, on a soul level, the people don't actually see each other and are actually linked, right? Can you see? It's a completely different way of touching or dealing with any problem. I mean, everything operates this way. So immediately we have a completely different entry point. Immediately we have a completely different way of dealing with it. Immediately we have a vast potential to really heal this family dynamic in a way nothing else can or would or will. So why is the mother looking out? Who is she looking towards? So that would be a question, a constellation question, right? Because now we're no longer on the surface. We're no longer going with the story that we have been presented. We are now like down here on a soul level. Who on a soul level is the mother tied to or linked to that she's looking for or seeking?